we're back. Season 6, Episode 2, The Crystalling, Part 2. This is the conclusion of the previous episode. During the previously on, I usually use that time to gather some really quick behind-the-scenes information. I can read pretty quickly, and try to find what I can about it, and just look for stuff. And as it was going, I was like, wait, that's not what happened last time. They used a stock crowd sound effect. Did you catch that? When they were like, oh my god, the crystal's been destroyed. You know, it's the, oh, in like that same pitch and tone. You've probably heard it a few thousand times. And it made the scene kind of comical. I only point that out because, once again, it seems to be pointing to the overall tone here. That this, even though this is a serious threat, they're trying to make this a little bit more lighthearted. Because something like this situation, could easily be basically horror, right? In fact, this could be tragic horror. An unknowing and innocent child accidentally destroys the homes and lives of thousands of people. Yeah, that sounds like tragic horror to me. So, it makes sense to me that they would try to use little visual and audio cues, like that one, in order to try and be like, no. Meanwhile, Twilight, correctly, points out the Crystal Heart was still operating back during the Crystal Empire episodes, despite being missing. It was not present in the central hub, but it was still there, and therefore its magic was still operating. And I'll talk more about the magic of that in a minute. Apparently right now, apparently. apparently. This far north, the weather has a will of its own. So what do you think that means exactly? I actually talk about this a little bit later as well, but there's several different ways you can take that. Now, the most obvious is, well, the Wendigos. Yeah, exactly, because those are a thing, and we know that they are something that have to be actively resisted. We do see even a hypothetical future, which is admittedly being told in a tale in a later episode, which I really like that episode, actually, about that, which, you know, is the idea of it going... The second option is the weather is natural, or rather what we would call natural. The weather does its own thing and isn't being constantly regulated in a controlled environment like most of the other weather is. I have a third answer, which never occurred to me until I was rewatching this time around. It's actually kind of a mixture of the second option and another thing. See, what is a storm? At its most basic concept, when you crucible it down, what is a storm? I suppose I'll just answer. Who knows how much Twitch delay I have here. A storm is weather patterns fixing themselves. It's restabilizing. A storm happens because something is wrong somewhere. Pressure's too high, there's too much humidity here, this temperature is the wrong temperature, etc. This is how storms, across the variety, all types of storms are started by this kind of imbalance, quote-unquote, this contrast, right? Well, hear me out for a second. Now, I know that's a massive simplification, by the way. What if this eternal storm that is happening up here is happening because 46 just subscribed to me for 9 months? Thank you very, very much, 46, for that sub, as always. And if you know where you want to put it, please let me know. But no, that exactly, Sierra Mike. You got there before I did. What if this eternal storm is so bad exactly because everything else is so regulated? Because that is theoretically... And I have done a little bit of research, but again, only surface level, how that would work in real life. If France was able to perfectly regulate just their borders and make a perfect idyllic weather pattern for France, hypothetically, the weather in all the surrounding areas would be borked as a direct consequence because of more or less constantly trying to balance this out, and the fact that there's this pressure, temperature, and energy thing, which is just wrong, right? Which is being regulated into a way that is not natural. So that's kind of my general thinking, is that this storm is a direct byproduct of the regulated environment of the rest of the area. Probably made worse by the fact that there's this bubble which is constantly being projected out here, maintaining a nice weather area. The heart. You absolutely can, 46. Thank you. I will put that towards Dawn of War 1. This came across my plate because I find, weather fascinating in general, but also because I was looking into what it would take to actually regulate and control environment on a large scale. And this is one of the biggest problems. Unless you can control all of the environment, like a whole planet's worth, absolutely and perfectly, with backups and regulators involved, then you're going to run into problems. And having that level and scale and scope of control is incredibly high-tier tech. That's like Star Trek levels of tech. And for those of you not aware, Star Trek is ludicrously high-tech when it comes to, fiction. And even Star Trek generally doesn't do that, although there are actually places in Star Trek that do that. Ryza is a good example of that. But even Ryza specifically maintains a bubble area, and then the rest of the world is just smashed. Anyways, I'm getting off topic. Point being, I just thought it was something interesting to think about and talk about. You guys know me. I love world building. I love setting stuff. Hang on. Let me go ahead and Google Translate something from Vigilant here. Let's hit the stream breaks here. Hit the stream breaks. And yeah, that's the other thing. It's one of those ironic things. Haha, Vigilant. Because it's like the Dyson shell, right? By the time you are advanced enough to be able to make a Dyson shell, you don't need it. Right? By the time you have the ability to perfectly control a planet's weather, you probably don't need to. Anyways. Looking up at my notes here. Oops, I scrolled down too far. That's why I'm off place. Meanwhile, Spike is still trying to figure out how to help Starlight and Sunburst, obviously. Can I just say, by the way, this episode is a really good example of how an A-plot and a B-plot format can work. Now, I've spoken about the A-plot, B-plot thing a lot in Star Trek, because Star Trek has done it well and amazing and okay and terrible and awful over its run. Lots of different... The A-plot, B-plot thing is a tool, like any other tool, and it depends on how you use it. But I tend to be against A-plot, B-plots, because usually they're badly done. It's usually hard to juggle two completely separate plots, while, I mean, I'm with that, Imperial Star Trek, while actually making both interesting and not having them step over each other, especially in terms of tone. Here I think it works quite well, because honestly, the A-plot is actually the Starlight Sunburst story. The B-plot, the less important plot, is the threat of the week, which if you're paying attention and watch my Star Trek stuff, those tend to be the A-plot, B-plot episodes I tend to enjoy the most, where the A-plot is the character-driven bit, and the B-plot is the threat bit. Anyways. So, Spike's trying to figure out how the hell do we fix this. It's not like there's some kind of spell that would magically compel us to pick up where we left off, and Sunburst's like, well, actually, I know several right off the top of my head. He also names drops a couple of ponies that I looked up, and yeah, those are some Season 7 ponies he just mentioned there. A couple of them. You thought I wouldn't catch it. I almost didn't, because I was actually jotting down an unrelated note, and then I was like, wait a second. Anyways, I don't know if they did that on purpose, but given something that will be happening going forwards, it's clear that they had a lot more of long-term planning in mind, more front-loaded storytelling when it comes to MLP, basically from this point onwards. And I would be willing to believe that they at least had vague ideas of what they wanted to do with that. And so we're doing what I would do as a writer. I would just drop little tidbits, right? Tiny little notes just to establish them in the background so that when they actually show up, it wouldn't be a brand new character out of nowhere kind of a deal. Little stuff like that. Anyways. The actual note I was jotting down when I noticed that, I know, Lord Jeremiah, was the fact that Starlight is... She's constantly doing this thing that I've done in real life. And I'm sure other people have done, or at least seen. And I'm trying to think of how to explain it, because it's one of those weird things that really makes no sense, but we do it, because we're human. Let's say you have an idea, but you're nervous, or you're uncertain, or you're not sure of yourself, and you don't have the self-confidence to just say, hey, I have an idea. So you phrase it as if it's someone else's idea. It's their idea. It's their thing. This is how this should happen because they said it was. And that way you're kind of distanced from blame, but more importantly, now the other person might be more inclined to accept the idea because it's not your idea. And yet Starlight does this entire scene, non-stop. Twilight wants to be friends. The Princess of Friendship wants us to go. Twilight says we should go this way. I don't know why Twilight would want this, but Twilight wants this, Twilight. She hammers it in almost a little bit too hard. But she does this constantly. She also does this later in this episode. I'll cover that when we get there. Yeah, that's brilliant. And again, very human. Because she just lacks any of the ability to emotionally or mentally cope or deal with this, so she's like, it's okay, this is... I mean, the authority figure over there is the one who said to do this, so it's alright to do this. Hell's bells, I've seen this in a professional environment. I cannot tell you how many times... Okay, this is a bit of a tangent, so forgive me. Something that pisses me off at a personal level is that people won't listen to you unless you've gone to school for it or you've made it, right? I'm sure you've heard that argument. Well, do you have a degree for it? Or, well, have you ever made a television show? I get those comments on about a monthly basis at this point in my life, where people are saying, Lord, you have no right to criticize or judge this. You've never made a game. You've never made a show of television, so you have no right to judge this, right? Now, that's true, I do make a show. Thank you for pointing that out, Mr. Red. You just made my day. There's a lot of tendency to only listen to something if it's being backed by something. Now, there's some reasonability there, and there's some gray here, but the point is, people will tend to not listen to you unless, oh, well, such and such said it. I say this has affected me professionally because I cannot tell you how many times back in the day I would have an idea, either how to fix something or how to change our workflow back in IT, back in my network engineer job, and people wouldn't listen to me. So I would lie. I hate to say that, but it's true. I would lie about it and say, "Oh, this is Bob's idea. Hey, Bob had this idea that we should do this." And you know what the response would be? Okay, go and implement that immediately. Because after all, Bob knows what he's talking about. He's been to school for this. What I would usually do to cover my tracks is I would usually then reach out to Bob in like an email and say, hey, I've decided to implement this. And what would usually happen is Bob would respond and say, okay, cool. But like I said, that has professionally irritated me because of how many times I've had to pull that little trick. More often than I probably should have. It's also one of the reasons I get so prickly when people imply that I don't know what I'm doing or what I'm talking about. Hell, even my own sister did that to me just 2 weeks ago. Not on purpose, but still, it irritated me. I'm like, sis, come on. Dangerous if it doesn't work. That's true. That did happen twice, I want to say. Yeah. No comment, I say, Ross. Arrogant or not, I do tend to have confidence in my own choices, believe it or not, so I was never particularly worried about it. I was worried about One-Winged Angel, though, who's in the wrong spot, apparently. We apparently haven't fixed that for the new computer. I didn't even know those were even visible, actually, to be completely honest. We're gonna fix that, aren't we, right now? Put that right over here. We'll get some Lich King in the My Little Pony. That fits for me. Eternal torment and suffering, and also ponies. One moment here. Give me just a second, One-Winged Angel. I'm going to do a quick test thing here. Oh, that's almost perfect. Just need to move it up. Right there. There we go. Boom. Booyaka. No, I do know what I'm doing. Holy crap. Who knew? Competency. Thank you very, very much, Starlight. And by... Oh my god. Thank you much, One-Winged Angel. Sorry, I was reading text as I bowed. Very, very much appreciate. As always, thank you. Yeah, you've done that, right? Where you're talking and you're reading at the same time, so you say one of the words that you're reading. And so, S.A. Ross just said, I like Starlight in this episode, and so, you know, it's... Thank you, One-Winged Angel. Very, 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 very much. It's up to... So I'd prefer it if you could, One-Winged Angel, to answer you. It helps me to keep track a lot better when it comes to the behind-the-scenes donation tracking I do. You know, my massive spreadsheet of Doom and the program that Zalok wrote for me. if you don't have standardized, you don't technically have to. It's just I'm going to count you as two separate people. I'd kind of rather you not do that, if that's okay. It's more of a request than anything, because you're gaming the system at that point. But it's not a huge deal, it's just you're gaming the system at that point. So, well, what you can do, you don't have to give me your name when we do it. What you can do is you can go to Patreon, and you can change your display name there. And I actually have a lot of people who have done exactly that, and change their display name to, you know, whatever they've got on Twitch, or whatever they've got on Discord, or whatever. Sometimes they're YouTube, depending on their perspective. So that way, that's them, right? So I look at that and I say, One-Winged Angel. So that's up to you. Happy Sunday, by the way. By the way, do you know what you want to put that 25 towards? Over here. Starlight. Where the hell was I? I was talking about something. And I can't remember where I was. Apollo's Fills. Right! Starlight was pulling the appeal to authority thing. Starlight was pulling that. Now, she was doing it more for emotional reasons, because she's an emotional wreck in this episode. But nevertheless, you get the idea that, you know, it's okay. All of this is okay. All these ideas, I'll put it towards Zelda too. You got it. Thank you again. All of these ideas are okay because they're not my idea. I'm not the one pushing for this. It's her idea. Please don't kill me. And she drags poor Spike away, wrapped up in the notes. Poor Spike. Meanwhile, Flurry Heart can teleport. Do you mind if I share a really side story that doesn't really have anything to do with anything? When I mentioned just a few minutes ago, or yesterday if you're watching the YouTube VODs, I mentioned earlier that I full-time was taking care of my niece for a while there, something I've mentioned a few times in the past. One of the discussions her mother and I had while I was doing that was, so which superpower would you think would be the least bad for her to have at this age in this state? Because that's actually an interesting creative exercise, right? Because most superpowers a baby should not have for many reasons. Damn it, Sierra Mike. One of the worst that we came up with, not the worst, yeah, invisibility would be awful, but one of the worst we came up with was the ability to teleport. If my beloved niece, as a baby, well, as a 1 and 2 year old at this point, had the ability to teleport, that would be terrible. And I'm watching this episode, and I see Flurry Heart teleport, and what actually happened is I'm sitting here, I've got my notes, you know, I've got my game face on, and I just kind of go... as I just picture all of the ways that can be horrible. And all of the ways that could go badly. That's terrifying. A baby who could start fires with her mind. Yeah, that would be pretty bad too, especially if she couldn't control it. And it would get worse if she's emotionally unstable. So imagine being like, fire. Then the fire freaks her out, so she makes more fire, which freaks her out, so she makes more fire. Seesaw! Thought you were taking care of the baby. I'm trying to! She can teleport. We have a bunch of shenanigans in this episode, which I have nothing to comment on. It's good stuff. It's just... yeah. There's this nice little tidbit. The camera, as Starlight and Spike are walking away, the camera focuses in on them. And in the background, we've got the snow and we've got the storm clouds. Again, forgive me for talking about the cinematography, but I'm a huge cinematography geek. What do you want from me? I love the focus emphasis. What they are doing is, in a way that no one's really supposed to notice, emphasizing that the main structure of this episode is all about Starlight and her very human, pardon the expression, struggles. It's all the character focus, right? It's all about the individual. Oh, and in the background, there's this horrible death storm that's going to kill thousands. But focus on the characters. I say it jokingly, but you get my point. That's actually surprisingly rare that an episode will do something like this, and I wanted to comment on it, regardless of the show. Starlight then mentioned... yeah, Spike's a great friend. Spike's actually pretty good in this whole episode. Starlight says, I'm the one Sunburst doesn't want to be friends with. Ouch. Can I just say been there? Now, you're probably thinking, what? Let me walk you through that. Because they don't say it out loud. This is wonderfully subtle. I guess subtle is probably the wrong word. It's wonderfully nuanced. They don't say it. But what happened there is she had put him up on a pedestal. I talked about that last episode, right? She was adhering to the ideal. What she really wanted, for all her fears, what she really wanted was to be embraced. Yes. You know? What she was really afraid of was being shunned. Neither happened. And that's worse. Because instead what she met was just general indifference. Starlight? Oh, yeah, hi, how are things going? Yeah. I mean, I guess we could talk, sure. Cough awkwardly. And that was it. So, yeah, exactly, Vigilant. There's no certainty now. It's not 1, and it's not 0. It's, And I love the way that they emphasize that without ever even saying it out loud. Oh, there's several Imperial Star Destroyer. Star Trek actually does that semi-frequently. My personal favorite example is in Voyager, The Swarm, where the A-plot is all about the Doctor, and the B-plot is all about some generic aliens we've never heard of before, and we'll never hear again, who are trying to destroy the ship. It's actually probably, I use that as an example so much because it's the most stark contrast between the quality of an A-plot and a B-plot that I've seen in a long time. Anyways. Samaritan Snare is another good example of that. And another good example of the contrast of quality, too, while we're on the subject. Anyways, so he didn't want to be my friend. Oh, that hit! That hit! And then Spike, of course, S.A. Ross, Spike said, I didn't hear him say that. He didn't have to say it. Without the all and without the nothing, all she was left with was uncertainty. He didn't have to say he didn't want to be my friend. Ouch. Just ouch. Yeah, that's just, bam, that is right there, right at the sternum. Ooh, that actually sternum's a little higher, but you get the point. They then weave this back into the B-plot. Hey, why is it snowing? Yeah, meanwhile, he's back at home just being like, We'll get to that in a minute, though. There's this nice little visual gag they have where there's a pony watering the flowers, and then it cuts away and it's frozen. Because, you know, the storm's coming in. This then leads to probably the actual worst part of the episode, where Applejack and Rainbow Dash lack the ability to convince people to stop being in line and camping out for the event. Now, I've camped out for events before. I actually have probably told this story before, how I was there, you know, in line going around the block for Star Trek 4. It's the first Star Trek film I saw in theaters. So I get you, but come on, guys. It's even made silly when Shining Armor walks up and effortlessly is like, "Hey guys, you need to go," and they're like, "Oh my god, we need to go." Just come on, guys. Hang on, I have an itch on my lip. That's what this brush is for. They never tell you the things that come along with having a beard. Itches. Because plot. This does drag this episode down a bit, which is a shame, because I really like this two-parter, other than this little weird side plot. But you know, this is like the Z plot at this point. That's not true. It's more like the D plot. But I'm getting off topic. So they have this massive thing where they're going through the library. And Cadence even has a line of dialogue that she's not actually sure how the books are organized. Huh. It's almost like having proper labeling so you don't get lost, or someone else can find your stuff might be a good thing. I'm not sure if that's on purpose, but that's actually pretty clever if that is. That's a nice little tie back to Starlight being lost in the castle because everything was unlabeled. Just interesting to think about. Anyways, this is a good time to mention, by the way, Flurry Heart is voiced by Tabitha St. Germain. I only point that out because she does an excellent job of it. And also Water is Wet. Moving on. Pinkie Pie also does a great job of summarizing the damage going on here. Seriously, it's one of the best little Pinkie Pie snarks I've heard in a long time. I don't have anything else to add to it. It was just really good. We also see here magic shields reflecting instead of absorbing, going back to the counterspell thing I was talking about earlier. Oh no, the book is destroyed. Meanwhile, this is all B-plot stuff. You notice I'm just kind of racing through the B-plot because it really is less interesting to talk about. But then we get back to the A-plot. Cadence hasn't even heard of Sunburst. Now, some of you probably know that I've only seen the episodes from this point up until Season 7 once. With, I think, like a couple of exceptions, which we might have already covered at this point. So I'm not super familiar with the material going forwards. But I find myself wondering, why is Sunburst here? He's not a crystal pony. Lol, I say Ross. Now, I started mentally picturing this. I don't know if they ever answer this on camera. But I mentally pictured the idea that he basically pulled a moon dancer. A little less severe, a little more Mocking Burns. Thank you very, very much. As always, Mocking Burns. I do appreciate the support. Thank you. Let me know when you know. You know, can I admit something? I always assume you mean these kind of burns, rather than, you know, verbal burns. Anyways, so I like the mental idea that he pulled a moon dancer, just less severe, rather than becoming a complete shut-in amongst friends and family and people who actually cared about her. Spirit Fair, you got it. Yeah, exactly. He wanted a fresh start. He flunked out of magic school. He wanted to get the hell out of Canterlot. He wanted to be gone. And so he hears that the Crystal Empire shows up, and, I mean, he's a geek, right? He's an enthusiast. Of course he would want to head up there. I mean, they have a massive library, after all. So he charters the train, gets the heck away from his life, and just starts over anew, right? Yeah, his house is literally a wizard hat, for God's sakes. The man's a geek. And I only mention this because it's interesting that in his doing so, he probably was trying to get a fresh start, and based on context clues, I think he failed. I think what he did was he's trying to get his fresh start, and then just stagnated, right? He hermited up, basically. And just didn't really make a lot of friends, didn't really get to know anybody, didn't really share anything with him, he just stayed in his house and read, and just kind of did whatever. The end, right? This would also help to explain why Cadence, despite someone who is very personable, and her whole shtick is getting along with people, has never even heard of him. But yeah, again, not as severe as Moon Dancer, it's just similar direction. Similar type of thing. Anyways, another thing, really quick, sorry, another little context clue. Starlight rushes in. Oh my god! And he's like, what? And she's like, haven't you looked outside? And then he looks outside and he's like, oh, that's wrong. But in other words, he hasn't looked outside. Now, that sounds like a minor thing. But I know people in real life who, as a habit, don't look outside. Don't acknowledge outside of their bubble. Sometimes professionally, you know, whatever's in their office or whatever's in their cubicle, that's it. And sometimes in a house, right? Yeah, I was gonna say, I'm sure some of you know what that feels like. I've done that before. I try not to do that anymore because I'm not that kind of person. I was only that way because of severe physical and mental and emotional trauma. But the idea of him being like, oh yeah, let me look outside. Oh yeah, sorry, 2020. There's another relevance there. COVID just keeps being relevant to all these things we're discussing. Later, we're going to play Pathologic 2. There's another COVID thing. Point being, he hadn't even looked outside yet. More context points for the shut-in thing I just mentioned. Then, look at my notes, hang on. I wanted to cover one more thing here. Princess, so, I told you I'd mention this, and I'm mentioning it here. Starlight pulls the same appeal to authority trick right here. Princess Cadence thought you could help. Now, let's make this clear. That's not quite a lie, but it's completely wrong. Starlight thinks he could help, and she mentioned it to Cadence, and now is adopting it. Now, I mentioned this because I don't think it's a lie. I don't think my point is I don't think she's doing it on purpose at this point. I think it is so ground into her as of this moment to automatically do this appeal to authority thing that it didn't even occur to her to phrase it any other way. Because there's no deception in her approach visually or audibly as she's designed. Instead, it's her thing, right? And yeah, you'll notice once again, villainous. Although in this case, again, it makes sense because of the emotional vulnerability and all the stuff we already talked about. This then leads to him flipping out a bit because he has very, very important work to do. A very, very small note then, a very, very small world-building note happens immediately after this. They mentioned that this is a royal crystalling, not a regular crystalling. Now, this could have been inferred from the first episode, but this states outright that crystallings happen regardless. It's not just something that's restricted to nobility, which just inclines me to something I'll talk about later, but remember that for later, okay? I do too, Lord Harriman. I mentioned that there's some exceptions. One of the ones I have seen multiple times is the Season 6 season ender, because it's so good. Anyways. What? I'm a geek too. Proud of it. He finally erupts. I'm not a wizard at all. I'm not anything. I'm not anybody. He's actually crying when he says it. And once again, the actors help sell this scene. Rushes off in tears, and he has a line which I wrote down. I know it's hard for you to understand, but not all of us end up achieving greatness. Remember, and I already kind of broke all this down last time. I already did my deep dive on the character motivations of both Sunburst and Starlight. This is them saying everything that I told you last time. This is them presenting on camera and fully on display everything that they've already shown. Once again, the show continues to show, then tell. So he calls it out, and he has a wonderful line. Do you know what it feels like to know so much and not be able to do any of it? Yes, I absolutely know what that feels like. How many of you have heard of me talk about tiers of insertion? On the off chance, that's very true, Sir Mike. On the off chance you haven't, just to be clear, one of the most common fictional questions, theory crafting questions that tends to be asked is, if you could end up in insert fictional setting, which would you pick, or where would you pick, or what would you want to be? It's an extremely common question. I've been seeing that question going back into, I think the earliest I encountered that question was in 3rd grade, with Mega Man 3 specifically. It's an old question, is what I'm trying to say. No, it was 4th grade, wasn't it? Yeah, it was, because I skipped a grade. Anyways, you get the point. Very old question. When I was a little bit older, entering high school years, I came up with the idea of tiers. Originally there was 3, and then there was 5, and nowadays there's 6. It's to establish the ground rules. Okay, well, you're being dumped into a setting, but what does that mean? Well, we have to define how you're being dumped into a setting. I swear this is all related. Just bear with me for a second. One of those tiers is Tier 1. There's also Tier 0, which is kind of one of the new ones, but just bear with me for a second. Tier 1 is when you're just dumped into the setting. You don't get to decide who you are, or what you are, or how you are, or why you are. You're in Star Trek now, right? Now, that is a tremendous creative challenge, because if you were just dumped into, say, Warcraft as Tier 1, you would be screwed. You can't learn magic, right? Because magic in Warcraft is something that's part of the essence and soul of how the entities within that setting function. You are not that. You're a human. You might be thinking, oh, there's humans in Warcraft. Yeah, those aren't you. Humans in Warcraft are a completely separate species from you in every way. And I could go into detail on that, but just trust me on this one. The same thing applies to a lot of settings. So a lot of settings they'll be like, would actually be pretty terrible to be dropped into, as Sierra Mike points out. Now, why is this relevant to that line, to know so much and not be able to do any of it? Usually when asked the tiers of insertion question for Tier 0 or Tier 1, I revert to settings where knowledge is the great skill. Pokemon is my personal favorite example of that. Because you don't need to be a mage in Pokemon. You don't need to have developed certain powers or be of a certain caste, or you don't have to have force sensitivity or be born a mutant or whatever. The only thing you need is to know it. Someone like... now, that's, of course, just semi-related, but the reason I bring that up is the overwhelming majority of the time, knowledge doesn't really help you do something. It simply helps you know how to do something. This really clearly, adamantly reinforces the idea that I've already talked about, that Sunburst is the support. He's the guy in the chair. And again, how immensely invaluable that is. I was going to use another parallel for this just because I felt like it, although I was going to use television productions, because having the person on the mic and having the person talking into the actor's ear when they're on camera, being able to pull out of them the thing that they need, that's invaluable, right? You could also say the director is the person in the chair when it comes to TV or movies, because the director knows. The director can't act, but the director knows, right? Well, the other parallel I want to use here is speedrunning. I know speedrunning very well. It's something I've been following for over a decade at this point, and I love it. I could tell you a whole lot about the specific tricks and mechanics and types of speedrunning. Actually, doing speedrunning is something that's mostly out of my vibe. There's a couple games I could speedrun reasonably well, but it's not something I can do. It's only something I know. And I use that distinction because I could argue that I know Star Trek very well, but I can't do Star Trek, but that's not really the same analogy. It needs to be something that can actually be done, it's just you are incapable of doing, but something you know very, very much about. I suppose a more depressing example of this would be someone who is really into a specific sport, who does not and cannot play that sport. You know? I know a friend of mine, ex-friend, someone who I haven't met or talked to in years, who knew football, European football, inside and out. Loved it. Could talk about strats and styles and approaches and techniques and what qualified as a flag and what didn't and how they did this and history knowledge. Could tell you so much about it. He was, in the interest of privacy, he was physically incapable of playing football. Now, what's funny, and S.A. Ross is quite correct, someone like that is great at being a coach. At someone who can actually... You're funny, Lord Herman. Someone who can actually still assist. Again, support is incredibly important. In virtually every level. You know? Those who can't do, teach, yeah. I'm sorry for delaying on this point for so long, but it really helps to humanize, for lack of a better way to put it, Sunburst, and the way that he is. In just 2 episodes, they have made this character... Yeah, no kidding, Bamber. They have made this character, who we've only had referenced once before, who is suddenly this amazingly engaging and interesting side character. It's just like, oh, wow. And yeah, Starlight, to continue this parallel, Sunburst could absolutely be a magic teacher. He would be damned good at it. Starlight, did I say Sunburst? Yes, I did. Sunburst could be a great teacher. Starlight could not. Starlight would be the DPS. Starlight would be the one actually... And we'll see more of that going forwards. Again, remixing magic is one of her other big character traits. Or, you know what I mean. Anyways, moving on. So this then leads to... So he admits and confesses and breaks down, and he's terrified of everything. And this leads to a quick comment. Is Sunburst Rincewind? Is that just me? I'm not going to explain that one, but I'm curious if anybody gets it. This leads to her exploding and really rant about what's bothering her. And she gives a quick... Again, the actress sells it. The actress sells this scene. This could easily have been a dumb or silly or narm scene, but instead it's just heart-wrenching. And she has a specific line that I wrote down. You're so terrified that ponies will find out what you did that you can't make any friends. Now, I can't relate to that one personally because I don't have any big traumatic thing in my past like that. Nothing I'm embarrassed about. Nothing I'm ashamed of is actually probably a better word for that. I have plenty I'm embarrassed about in my past. Whew. But nevertheless, the way she says that sells it. And it also helps to establish something that I remember, and again, I've only seen these episodes once, but I remember as being one of the more interesting subplots for Starlight in this season. That subplot would be she was too easily forgiven. And what I mean by that is it's kind of being portrayed as a bad thing, how easily forgiven she was. Because not only has she not forgiven herself, but she lives in this state of uncertainty and fear about this. And this is going to come up. I know it's going to come up in future episodes, where she's going to wig out. Because she is so bothered by the fact that everyone's just trying to gloss over what she did. And she's trying to cope with that. To put it into more simplistic terms, she wants emotional closure and she keeps not getting it. Because everyone's just like, nah, it's fine. And she's like, it's not fine! Anyways, I mentioned this in the earlier episode. But we'll cover more of that in the future, obviously. Meanwhile, all he can think is, did you really travel through time? Exactly, Sierra Mike. Did you really travel through time? And I love how Spike pops in. I told you he'd be impressed. So, naturally, they're just evacuating. It's like, okay, we need to get the hell out of here. Unless you have a spell that can do this and this and this and this. Naturally, he does know about a spell because... Guy in the chair. Support! So we have a couple of nice quick shots. This is when I made my notes about the storm, which we've actually already talked about. There's a nice shot of the snow, which is horizontal because of how stark and severe the wind are. And yeah, Rainbow being forced to run because her wings were frozen. Yeah, there's a lot of little nice touches in the visual presentation of how bad this storm is, and I just wanted to comment on them really quick. That's some good stuff. But then Starlight and Sunburst come in, and Celestia just gives this really quick smile to him, which I thought was interesting. I've already made this comment before, but yeah, I can do that. I've already made this comment before, but Celestia seems to have a lot of throw it out and see what happens kind of an approach to leadership, which sometimes works out and sometimes doesn't, but that does seem to be her overall style, right? And this really feels like one of those moments where she kind of let Sunburst drop out and she didn't really reach out to him because she thought, well, let's let him burn out and let's see what happens, right? Whether that's a good or a bad thing is up to you. I just wanted to comment on it because in no way does she seem particularly surprised that Sunburst decides to show up and turn this around. That's the idea, S.A. Ross. You know, this, aha, it worked, or, oh, he's finally living up his potential, or whatever. Personally, in this exact case, I wouldn't really go with that, but then again, whatever. We've talked about Celestia's leadership styles before. Let's move on. Meanwhile, Sunburst leads Twilight to the answer, and as a quick aside here, if I want to say, that's true, she does have faith in others. That is a valid point about Celestia. Like I said, whether it's a good or bad thing is up to you. Superpower artifacts can't just be mended with magic. They require something that is directly connected to the nature of that artifact, and in this case, the crystalling itself works. So, you know... this then leads to one other tiny little tidbit, and I want to shine a spotlight on this for just a second. We spent some time discussing the deferring to authority thing, right? And how Starlight has spent most of the episode being like, oh, it's Twilight's idea, or oh, it's Cadence's idea. At this point, she flat out states that Sunburst has got this. Now, two things. First of all, everyone, when Sunburst says, I'm not a wizard, everyone's like, huh? And the impression the episode gives is everyone's about to give up on the plan. Starlight then tries to convince them, and she has this really nervous, uncertain look on her face, because for the first time, she's having to not defer to an authority figure, but instead say, well, this is my idea. Oh God, please work. And again, been there. Yeah, Celestia was the only one who didn't look shocked. Everyone else did. There was even an audible gasp, for God's sakes. So, the one time she doesn't do it, she's nervous, she's uncertain, lack of confidence, but she still at least makes that step, and of course it does work out. I love the visualization. The magic of the people empowers the pattern on the snowflake, gets absorbed into the crystal, which gets dumped into the heart. I find myself wondering how often the heart really needs recharging in order to keep this bubble up, in order to maintain the environment we talked about earlier. Just food for thought. Flurry Heart, you know, considering that dampening magic exists, I'm a little surprised they didn't already know this. Like, nobody could figure out a dampening spell for Flurry Heart. it took Sunburst to do that. Maybe it's separate for an alicorn, I don't know. I don't have anything else to add to that. Also true, S.A. Ross. Also true, because the reflection magic, which she has already shown. So Twilight worries about whether or not she's a good teacher. I don't remember, but I feel like that's going to be a subplot in the future. And that leads to one last thing I wanted to comment on. This is the last thing I have for today before we discuss the ratings for these episodes. As the train is taking off, you see this tiny little black dot flying over to the city. Never saw that before. I actually had to rewind because I caught it and was like, wait a second. Because I was wrapping up and when I saw it, I was like, wait, what? And made the window a little bit bigger. And yeah, no, that was Thorax. Nice touch. Interesting that they're doing that kind. Again, I feel like they're doing more front-loaded continuity from this point onwards rather than back-loaded continuity. You know, they're playing, they're dropping notes to be picked up later, kind of a thing. I wonder how many people caught that when that went live for the first time. Anyways, if it's not obvious, given the fact that we've been talking about this for like an hour and a half at this point, I'm barely going to get a lunch break before we start up Pathologic. I really like these episodes a lot. Yeah, exactly. Stabby Keith, that's exactly the mentality I was thinking. I will say there are a few, admittedly minor things that pull them down a little bit from what I would normally consider purple territory. But I do have to say, if this is a really smart thing on their part. If you're going to start what is effectively a brand new main character, no pun intended, to the show, starting strong is exactly what you should do. And I think they did a good job here. I think they started very strong with her. They absolutely did a lot to humanize her and give her, relatability and empathy and showcase the beginnings of several, character arcs that are going through her, while still showcasing some of her more villainous traits, etc., etc. But yeah, I'm kind of content with Red. I think I'm okay with also rating these as one episode. Oh yeah, we also get Sunburst and Flurry Heart as new characters here. While we're on the subject. Whoops, wrong thing. There we go. But I think I'm content to put this as red for Mr. Haber's next entry, which is interesting because that means he has a very fascinating track record so far. Which one was Leap of Faith? Oh, that one. Yeah, no, Leap of Faith was the Flim and Flam, the second Flim Flam episode. The Flim Flam Miracle Tonic. Yeah, that one. It's the only episode of his so far that I haven't liked. See you around Mockingbirds. Either way, some good stuff, some strong stuff. Next week we get Maud, my favorite character on the show. Well, one of my favorite characters on the show. And then On Your Marks, which is another good one. I've been debating something to try and sync up the schedule. We might do a week where we do 4 episodes instead of 2. It will probably not be next week. It will definitely not be this week. Because, at some point I am going to have to get groceries. But I've been debating doing that to make up for the lost time that we, lost and get us back on schedule. I'll math that out at some point in the future. But for now, I hope you guys have enjoyed. And so I'm going to take like a 20-minute break here, which basically is just mean I'm going to eat, and then I'm going to come right back here. And we're going to go ahead and start up Pathologic 2 again. So, see some of you in a bit. See the rest of you later.